The main thing to understand about the Second World War is that the territory of Ukraine is the cause of the Second World War. The idea was that Germany is going to build an empire eastward, which will merge German industry with Ukrainian rich black soil and create a power that will rival the British and the Americans into the future. Without this particular colonial vision, at which Ukraine is the center, there wouldn't have been a Second World War. Now, Ukrainians didn't know anything about this. Most Germans didn't really know anything about this. We like to have simple stories about the Second World War. We like to hear about the Blitz. We like to hear about Pearl Harbor. We like the French Resistance. We like a story about a country that's been invaded and is somehow responding. In the case of Ukraine, we have to think a little bit more. First of all, you have a war which begins not just with Nazi Germany invading a country, but with the Soviet Union invading a country. And this is the point where basically everybody's myth of the Second World War goes wrong. The British want to have it start in the middle of 1941, the Americans at the end of 1941, the French in spring 1940. But the Second World War begins in September of 1939. And it begins with an alliance between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. It begins with the Soviet Union invading Poland, basically as an ally of Nazi Germany. It begins then with the Soviet Republic of Ukraine, a few months after that invasion, getting stretched out, extended to the west to take former territories from Poland. So in the first part of the Second World War, you have this very curious situation from a Ukrainian point of view. Ukraine has now become what the Ukrainians call Soborna. Ukrainian territory has been extended, but it's all under Soviet power, and that Soviet power is being deployed to help Nazi Germany. The agricultural surplus of Ukraine is being used to feed the German soldiers who are invading the Low Countries, who are invading France, who are bombing the airmen who are bombing Britain. So the first part of the Second World War finds Soviet Ukraine extended. The next part of the Second World War is when Germany betrays its Soviet ally and when the Wehrmacht, the German army, invades the Soviet Union. This is the part of the war which is above all about Ukraine. The purpose of this war from the German point of view, or rather from Hitler's personal point of view, is to destroy Soviet power so that Ukrainian territory can feed Germany and can become part of a larger German empire. But here again, things are a little bit complicated. At the beginning, when Germany invades Ukraine, there are many Ukrainians who think, well, this German occupation can't possibly be worse than Soviet power. And the reason people thought that was they had a couple of memories. The first was Germany had been present during the First World War, and although it had been exploitative, it hadn't been horrible. The second memory was of the Great Famine of 1932 to 1933. Germany is invading the Soviet Union only 8-9 years after that experience. So many Ukrainians, or many inhabitants of Ukraine, other people too, thought, Russians, Jews, Poles, thought this can't possibly be worse than the 5-year plan. This can't possibly be worse than Soviet power. And so at the beginning, you had quite a lot of sympathy, or at least hope, attached to the German occupation of Ukraine. The Soviets, when they occupied countries, didn't treat it as an occupation. They treated it as the nullification of the state that was there before. The Germans, by the way, followed the same logic. You have the rule of law destroyed once, and then you have the Soviet order destroyed on top of that. And so this double occupation, which we can see if we look at the history of Ukraine, is also very important for understanding the larger history of how the Holocaust unfolds and how other crimes unfold. And so in Ukraine, along with Belarus, along with the Baltic states, the Holocaust emerges as a mass killing campaign. This is a terrible, terrible part about the history of Ukraine. But insofar as understanding the Holocaust is essential to understanding European history and indeed ourselves, this is a bit of Ukrainian history that we have to have in our minds. I think history is there to stop the worst mistakes. So if Ukrainian nationalists want to say Ukrainian nationalists played some kind of helpful role during the Second World War, history is there to tell us otherwise. I mean, history is there to say these people were wrong to think that Germany was going to be their ally. If, on the other hand, Russians today want to say Ukraine was somehow fascist collaborationist entity during the Second World War. History is there to tell us that Ukraine suffered far more than Russia, not just proportionately, but it suffered more in absolute terms than Russia during the Second World War. History is there to tell us that some of the most decisive battles during the Second World War were fought in Ukraine, and history is there to tell us that Ukraine was Hitler's ultimate object. It was the thing that Hitler wanted to conquer. So I don't think it's history's job to create a nice story that brings us all together. I think it's history's job more to correct us, to clip our wings, to keep us from creating the myths that justify more aggression, or from creating the myths that say that we were always right.